We want to welcome everybody to the first episode of Foundations to Fortune. So a podcast that we are going to do and talk about kind of everybody has a story, an origin story of how they got started and got into what they're doing today, but it's usually built on some kind of a foundation. And many times, people's what I call their origin story is very fascinating, very interesting. I know I've been on numerous podcasts around the country, and one of the number one items that seems to resonate with those that listen to the podcast is, so Brian, how did you get into multifamily, right? And so my origin story is very unique, very interesting. But what I've realized is that everybody has one of those origin stories that is very fascinating. So that is where I came up with the kind of the concept of the podcast and the name of Foundations to Fortune. Our first guest on my very first podcast is my good friend Trey Palmedo with NewPoint Real Estate Capital. Trey and I go back years, a number of years, and we've got a great origin story on how we actually got together then as well. But welcome, Trey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. You say first podcast. You were my first deal.
Yeah.
So this is it's good way to reciprocate.
That's right. Yeah, and you'll be speaking today at the REN meeting, and I always kick off the first of the year by having Trey on as well.
The deep interest that everyone has in capital markets.
Yeah, exactly. So we may get into a little bit about that, but we will get into talk a little bit about that. But what I really want to talk about, your story, right? So for people that may not know Trey Palmedo, and let's talk about your kind of growing up years.
Yeah.
Because to me, that was very fascinating because, a lot of people think, okay, Trey's very successful, as an originator, running for NewPoint Capital, kind of a territory region, all the Southeast and all of that. And you've had a real nice kind of career where you've really scaled yourself up. But not everybody understands that, your growing up years were not the most pleasant. So
that's one way to put it.
So I'll kind of let you go. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, it'll be like a therapy session if we just ignore the microphones. No, it's interesting that you say, everybody has an origin story into multifamily and what we all do. I think my origin story actually is housing. Like I am in housing by happenstance, but I fell in love with housing sort of by fate, I think. If I go back to the beginning, I guess, of my childhood, it was tough from the onset with respect to housing. My father and my mother divorced very early. It was not a successful marriage from the onset. And my father married my stepmother. And I think from the age of 6 years old to something like 10 years old, I lived in probably 14 or 15 different houses. We would constantly bounce around. People are like, were you a military child? No, no, just a byproduct of some really bad financial planning. And my stepmother was not a nice person, to say the least. Had multiple visits with the Department of Human Resources in Alabama. It was a tough childhood, especially the younger part of it. But around the age of 10-ish, something around third grade or fourth grade, whatever that is, I moved in with my grandmother at the time. Lived with her in Alabama. And some cousins, and she was raising, 6 of us under one roof. She that was like 10. She passed away when I was 15. All the stuff that happened to me before 15 years old is, I don't really consider it a huge part of my sort of being today. It's really what started after I was 15. When she passed away, there was not really anywhere for me to go. And, it's weird when you're 15 and you're kind of thrown out into the world. You can learn very quickly, but the world can be, when you're 15 and alone, the world can be very cruel and it can be very nice. And for whatever reason, I caught the nice side of it. I had a rough patch for the first, call it 6 months, where I was literally homeless. I was living in a Ford Explorer in a Walmart parking lot. But my grandmother, who had come over from Dublin, Ireland, was Catholic, and really, like, her whole dream, my whole life was for me to go to a Catholic school. So I kind of self-applied to a private Catholic school in a little bitty town in Alabama. I always joke, I was like, it was a poor town, and we were by far and away the poorest school. And I was by far and away the poorest kid in that school. But I went to that on a scholarship from the diocese out of Birmingham, and from there, my story goes from what I would say is a really rough, kind of sad young childhood to a really exciting adventure that luckily panned out for me. There was an English teacher that played a huge role in my life. Kind of grabbed a hold of me early and took a degenerate high schooler and told him he wasn't allowed to be one. Go ahead.
But I think it's the point I think is great with that. The story is from the standpoint of you could have chosen to go a different direction.
Yeah.
Right? With that kind of an upbringing, you could have chosen to, find trouble and get into trouble. Maybe not that you didn't, but but you could have really taken a different path.
There were
right?
multiple
And so,
there were multiple people that pulled me away from going down that path a lot. That teacher, there were 3 brothers that I met very early on to go into that school that I, got really close with. I ended up living with their family for a year, from like my entire junior year and some of my senior year. Their mother, I kind of look back to that moment and I think how strange it must have been.
So that was kind of a turning point for you?
Yeah, I think so. But how strange it must have been for her to be an adult and to see this, 16-year-old kid just keep coming home with your children and wondering, like, why is everyone telling you that you could just keep coming to our house every night? Who's telling you this? But the reality was no one was, right? There was nobody telling me. I lived a very unique, from 15 to 18, I was an adult. There was nobody telling me what to do. I had no idea where I was going to sleep every night. There were, multiple people in my life that were pulling me towards something good for a reason that I really can't explain. I tell people every time, like, my story is not that I, made myself out of nothing. My story is that I was nothing and a bunch of people made me. Yeah. And that's a reflection of my entire career. Yeah. So my English teacher, that family, other families, a buddy of mine, I lived with his family for a lot of my senior year. And then I wanted to go to college, and I think she got me there.
Did your friend's mom ever say, "Gee, Trey, you keep showing up here"? Welcome.
Well, she would feed me and do my laundry, and cut my hair. So at some point, I think she figured out, like, something's something's unique.
This guy doesn't have anywhere to go necessarily.
I saw her like 2 months ago. So of those brothers, one of them just had a baby, and I went to their baby shower, and I saw her, and I sat down and I talked to her for like an hour, and I was like, what a weird, like, that we're sitting here now, that like 16-year-old me was like, you were trying to keep him out of a ditch, and now I'm like here at your son's, my best friend's, birthing of their baby, or baby shower. So he had his baby last week, actually.
So tell me about your English teacher.
Miss Pullen was her name. Actually, I told myself I wasn't going to, she's the only name I'm going to use because
Okay.
I told myself I wasn't going to say a bunch of names today. No, she was incredible. I love musicals now.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of her. Like, she was really big into musicals. I don't know. I think inside of every teacher is an attraction towards the kid that stands the least chance. That's what draws them to the job is to go out and change a life. And I think of, not that I'm only 33 now, so I've hopefully got a lot of runway, but I've had some impact on a lot of people's lives. And, none of that impact happens if it wasn't for the impact that she had on mine.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a great saying, I heard it in college. It's sometimes you I'm going to butcher this saying, but it's like sometimes you plant a seed of a tree whose shade you'll never sit under. And she planted a seed in me that has shaded an entire world. I mean, I have 3 children now, right? Like that's a world in of itself.
Yeah.
And in a business with employees who have families, and she caused the extension of that. So she was incredibly special in my life. She still is. We talk from time to time.
Well, it's great that you've taken that and kind of passed it on to others, right?
Yeah, I've certainly been the benefit of it more so than anything. But yeah, I think the whole self-made idea that people talk about, and people especially talk to me about it. They'll be like, "It's so cool that you're self-made." I'm like, I am the opposite of self-made. I can assure you, if myself had been left up to making me, this would not be the story. I can assure you that.
Let's back up. Tell me about the year of living in the Ford Explorer in the parking lot.
Yeah. So not. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but I love this. I love this sort of moment in my life because the Walmart was attached to a McDonald's. Okay, and so I would run into $5 all the time. Right, you just over your course of your sort of in that era of your life, $5 is like the denominating currency that's a big moment for you. And I always had to choose between if I was going to get a 2 cheeseburger meal or a pack of cigarettes. And so I would decide on the pack of cigarettes if I knew that it was going to be a long time before I was going to get to that next $5, right? So my grandparents, my other grandparents, who were by far and away, the most loving and influential people in my life. Unfortunately, my story is I had three really great grandparents, and they all died way too early. But they had given me a 1999 Ford Explorer, and when I turned 16 years old, and that Ford Explorer became like my ecosystem, right? Like I would go, my clothes were in it, and this wasn't a long period, right? This was like 30 days, but my clothes were in it. I would use it to go to school. I would go like towel bathe in the Walmart bathroom. This was like pre getting to live with this family.
Yeah.
So it was a long. It needed to happen quick. but yeah,
30 days.
Yeah. So my little ecosystem of this Walmart parking lot was my Ford Explorer, the Walmart, the McDonald's, and the ability to choose between a 2 cheeseburger meal or cigarettes. That was my world for 30 days. It was a very weird time, but it was fun. And then I go to school.
Yeah.
Which was quite literally right across the street, which was kind of this whole little triangle of.
Really was the ecosystem. It was like right there together.
Yes. The school was less than probably, 5,000 feet away. Yeah. The McDonald's was in the Walmart parking lot. Like it was just all one,
So after the ecosystem, you went to live with invited yourself to the family.
Yes. Yeah. Well, sort of went and wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
And I remember, so one of my buddies, he looked at me one night. He's like, "So you coming back?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he looked at me. He goes, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, is that okay?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, come on." Yeah, yeah. I won't talk about what we were doing as 16-year-old boys in the middle of. So they lived like an hour away from school, the very, very country area, and we would commute in the morning. But when you would get to that area, you would lose cell phone service for like a 30-mile radius. So we were 16-year-old boys in the quite literal middle of nowhere, left to our own devices. So you
That's
can come
never
up with,
good.
Oh, well, good foundation building.
But if there wasn't a lot of trouble to get into,
Right.
I guess could be the story too. So,
Right.
So once you were in school, then obviously high school, then college.
Yeah.
So when you're going to school, what kind of made you say, what, I think maybe I got to go to college and see if I can, make, not that you weren't making something of yourself, but to say, hey, maybe I go to college and
Yeah. The English teacher.
do something with my life.
Yeah. So Miss Pullen, she told me that I had to go to college. And I was like, I don't even know how to begin to pay for that. I can distinctly remember sitting in our yearbook room at school, looking up the price of an apartment in Auburn, which at the time was like $375 a month. I mean, it was so cheap.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, it was a little bit more than that because I think my first rent was $375. And I looked it up and I was like, oh, this is not for me, but she was like, no, you have to go to college. And I was like, okay. And I think I had a really good ACT score. I didn't have a great GPA, but I had a good ACT score. And it was just enough back then to get into Auburn, which is where I went, by the way, I should say.
Yeah.
But got into Auburn, and then when I got there, I was like, well, I want to make her, proud. Like, she helped me get here. I want to make her proud. And so my first semester, I got like a 4.0 GPA, and it was remarkably easy. And I was like, oh, I guess, not in the high school setting, but in a college setting, I was academically better.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is super simple. I'll do this. And so I did, well my first couple years of college. And the Obama administration had just done the Pell Grants, which were literally like free money. It was student loan money, but you didn't have to pay it back. And I took full advantage of that and paid for school that way. Yeah. So I got into college at a weird moment. So I went in 2010 to 2015 because I did a victory lap. But in that singular moment, like college tuitions had started to rise, but they weren't like where they are today. But kind of what was the catalyst of that was the student loan accessibility to student loan money. And I just happened to join it like right when it became really accessible. Like the Obama administration prioritized higher education, and I was right in that. So it was good.
So when you were in there with your English teacher, was she the one that said, hey, you got to go to Auburn? Or did she say, hey,
she wanted me to go
to Alabama?
Yeah,
or did she want me to go to Georgia or what?
She wanted me to go to JSU, which was like the local university.
Okay.
Yeah. But I wanted to go to Auburn. In that moment, I was like, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go for the football team that I like. And one of the brothers had gone to Auburn as well. So that was another thing. And I kind of walked into a friend group that he had built. And I will say, like, once I got to Auburn, everything about my life changed. And I, like, just really became who I am today.
Yeah.
All of it is sort of a culmination of 5 years at Auburn and the different experiences that I went through.
Yeah. So how did you get yourself into Auburn then?
My ACT.
You're saying your ACT score was good, but you were like, I can't afford this.
Yeah, so mostly student loan money.
Yeah.
Also, I go back and think that her best friend sat on the board of admissions to Alabama. And I obviously didn't go to Alabama, but those people would talk, and I think she helped because I look back and go, I don't know how I got in. Like my GPA was terrible. I was a degenerate being pulled across the line in high school. Right when I got to college, it was like as long as you academically did well, degeneracy was okay. But yeah,
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So when you got to college, what drew you to finance?
Actually, I started college pre-law.
Okay.
I was a psych major, and I wanted to be a lawyer. So I became really obsessed with politics when I was 16, and I figured I'd go into law and try and run that path. I was pre-law. I took my LSAT. I had a good score on my LSAT, I had a good GPA. I could have gone to or maybe, I don't know, you never know. But I think I could have gone to the law school that I wanted to go to. And then I watched a movie one night called Margin Call. And that night, I think I was a junior or just starting my junior year. I watched that movie, and the next day I went and changed my major to finance. And that is not a movie, by the way, that you should watch and change your major to finance. That is a movie that you should watch and go, wow, our banking system has some really messed up components of it. But I saw it as like a, the room where it happens moment. And I was like, well, one lawyer in a sea of lawyers, whatever, but an American banker is the room where it happens. And now I am the room. Yeah. Now I run the room. So
That's interesting. That movie is what
that was it.
Changed your whole major, changed your trajectory of where you are today.
Yeah, it really did. That movie was again, like little. Yeah. Life is probably just a bunch of anecdotal ancillary moments that all sprinkle into making a cake. But I got some cool sprinkles. So.
Yeah. But that's what I love about this. That's why I wanted to have you on and talk about, because your story, right? So, because a lot of people know you, a lot of people who listen to this podcast know Trey Palmedo, but they really don't know you, right?
Yeah.
They don't know, the things in your life that, that changed your directions, and made you who you are today. And that's the whole point of doing this podcast, is I wanted to bring this kind of stuff out so that people can really see that, not everybody is blessed with the silver spoon and is making a lot of money and has always been that way and grew up, extremely wealthy and all that. That's very few.
Very few.
Right? And
very few.
And everybody has these kind of stories. So this is why I love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I read a statistic somewhere that it was either Charles Schwab or TD Ameritrade, one of the two. They found that something like 85%, I don't know, I'm going to butcher this. It's in the 80s, I think. But 80 to 85% of American millionaires are, and again, I don't like the moniker, but to this point, self-made. And what they say by self-made is they inherited less than $4,000. Wow. So if you think about it, like, the sort of macro and micro ecosystems of American capitalism is one of the few places in the history of the world and in the current state of the world where a story like mine can happen, right? And so I think that the sort of propensity for people that grow up without much of anything at all and turn something into it is a story that, and I'm not saying me, but I'm saying that story should be celebrated because it's a cornerstone of our sort of
absolutely
country's values.
Absolutely should be celebrated and congratulated.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks.
Yeah. So talk about how you got into basically helping work with investors and the whole finance and what you're doing today and working with the agencies and all of those.
It's another sprinkle. It's another sprinkle to the cake. It's a cool story.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't even know if you know this about me, Brian, but I ran for public office. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, you did. Yeah, because you used to be
as a city councilman.
That's right. A councilman. That's where we're talking. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Okay. I don't tell a whole lot of people that story anymore because it opens up too many questions. But all right. So I was when I got out of college, I went to work for a basically call center at UBS, which is like the merged with Credit Suisse, but it's a giant wealth manager, colloquially the Swiss bank. And I went to their call center to study for my Series 7. We used to joke and call UBS undergraduate business school because everybody there was under the age of 30. Like my manager was 27 years old. His manager was like 32, right? Like the hierarchy of people. Once you were 40, you left. Like that was the place. So so I go and again like got into a super supportive environment where my managers were like, yeah, we'll let you, you have to be sponsored to take a Series 7, which is what you need to trade. And they said, we'll sponsor you to take your Series 7 if you do X, Y, Z. So like 6 months into working there, I had my Series 7, and I went to trade on our trading platform for money managed accounts. And at the same time, I launched a candidacy for the State House of Representatives, primarying an incumbent, because from 16, I was super interested in politics.
Yep.
So 2 weeks into my campaign, the bank came to me and they were like, hey, we just got a notification that you're running for public office. Is that correct? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, you cannot trade securities for a publicly traded firm and run for office at the same time. So you're going to have to choose one or the other, and we'll give you 2 weeks to do so. And I was like, that day I told him, I was like, I'm going to run. Like, I'm not, I was a bull in a china shop. I was like, I'm going to run. And so I left thinking that I would be like the most employable person in the city. This was 2017.
And that was here in
Nashville.
right?
Yeah. And so in 2017 in Nashville, jobs were everywhere. I had worked for a major bank. I had a good, academic background. I had a network that was rapidly growing, and I could not find anybody to give me a job because they didn't want to hire a candidate. So when the first week that I was in Nashville,
The one thing you didn't think about.
I know, right? Right. The first week I was in Nashville, I went down on Broadway, and I got like hammered and stayed out till 2 a.m. I was wearing an Auburn polo. I still have this polo. I was wearing an Auburn polo, and I was like walking around, and some guy like tapped me and went, War Eagle. And I said, War Eagle, man. And he's like, I obviously looked young, and he was like, did you just graduate? And I was like, yeah, like literally like 3 weeks ago. And he was like, well, I'm the vice president of the Auburn Alumni Club, and we're doing our freshman send-off for next summer's kids. Would you like to come speak and tell them, what Auburn was like from a perspective of growing? Flash forward 2 years, that guy lived in the district that I was running in, and I needed signatures. I go to him to get my signatures thing out, and I'd left my job, and I go to him, and I've been looking for like 2 months, and I needed a signature. He goes, oh, by the way, how's the job search going? And I just had a very vulnerable moment with him, and I was like, honestly, man, it's going terrible. Like, I'm running out of money. I don't know what to do. Nobody will hire me. I have begged people. And he was like, why don't you come work with me? And I was like, well, what do you do? And he goes, I broker mortgages to multifamily owner-operators. And his name was, I'm not going to use names. I said blank. I don't know what any of those words mean. And he's like, oh, it's sales. You'll love it. Yeah. And so I went and started that work. For someone in my career who is like really at sort of the peak of their career, doing $100 million a year in business is a good career, right? Like you'll get that is like you're gonna do well. Like that's a good career. My very first year in the business, I did $130 million. So I fell so rapidly in love with housing and capital markets and finance and the value that I was adding. I didn't as much fall in love with brokerage as much as I would fall in love with direct, right, which is what I do now. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I just, to think that I'm in this business because I was out at 2 a.m. on Broadway and some guy tapped me on the shoulder is another sprinkle that is my ridiculous life.
Yeah. I like how you call them sprinkles. That's a good.
I made that up today.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of metaphors. As we get into this, you're going to find out. I love metaphors.
So let's talk about going from brokerage to agency.
I loved what I was doing. So, real quick, the difference. So a mortgage broker is someone who will find a client, like an owner-operator, and then they will find out what their financing needs are, and then they'll go find a lender to fit that financing need, and they'll do that for a fee. What I do is I'm a lender, just straight up. So all my clients are owner-operators, and I literally work directly for them without a broker involved. When I was working the mortgage brokerage role, I loved the work. I didn't care as much for brokerage. I thought I'd be better on the lending side of it. But the person that I was working for, just we could not have had more opposite values and where we thought we should be in who we should be in business and who we should be in life. And so I just quite frankly and candidly didn't want to work for him anymore.
Right.
He did not feel as strongly about me not working for him as I felt, because when I tried to leave him, he spent 3 months trying to sue me. You remember?
Yeah.
This is about when your and I's relationship kicked off.
I remember this.
That was I say to this day, of everything that I've ever done, that was the 3 hardest months of my life. That was, Kate and I had just gotten engaged. We were, oh man, I have so many stories I want to tell. Okay, all right, so we're gonna do them all. so I got to, I'm in the mortgage brokerage role, and a recruiter for the firm that I went to work for to begin with calls me up, and they're like, hey, we're looking for somebody to start a Nashville office. We're reaching out to some folks in the industry in the area. We're looking for someone with 10 years of experience and $1 billion book. And I was like, then why are you calling me? I've been in the business for a year, and I don't know half the words you just said. And he's like, you know what? Just talk to the managing director. Maybe it'll go well or whatever. I think this was just a recruiter, just kind of, Well, I got on the phone with my MD at my previous shop, and it's supposed to be like a 15 to 20 minute intro. We talked for 4 hours, and
4 hours.
4 hours, and at the end he said, we're going to hire you. And I was like, this was a huge moment in my life. Number one, like my base salary at the brokerage firm was like $35,000 a year. I was trying to make it on $35,000 a year in Nashville is tough. They were going to pay me $100,000. And at the time I thought $100,000 a year is like I don't even know what I would do with all that money. Right. So to me, and I just gotten engaged, and, we were wedding planning. And I was like, this is going to be incredible. And also, I had no money, right? $35,000 a year is literally every dollar's out the door. I was going backwards. I think I left that year something like $45,000 in credit card debt. No joke, because I'd spent it trying to kick the business off. And so I took that role, obviously. And when I sent in my resignation paperwork to my employer at the time, the mortgage brokerage shop, he told me that he was going to do everything he possibly could to make sure that I did not wind up in that role. He was going to sue me for a non-compete clause and make sure, he was like, I'm going to ruin your career. And I had literally no dollars to my name. I was in debt, no dollars to my name to fight him. Kate was working at a hotel for $15 an hour. That was the money that we had to try and make rent every month. And so for the next 3 months, she and I would go walk on Shelby, Shelby Park? Mm-hmm. We would go walk the trail, and I would just hold her hand and cry the whole way and say this is that was the worst, by far and away the worst 3 months of my life. And I ended up getting a job at a country club at Richland Country Club. Guys, stop dropping names. I had a job at a country club serving the bartenders downstairs. Now, you'll appreciate this. At CCIM, a class that we did, one of the guys there that was in class with me, working at was a member at that club, and came up to me while I was, and I'm not a proud person when it comes to this stuff. I ran barbecue when I was starting my brokerage career. I moved furniture. I have no problem working. But serving him that drink when I knew that my life was in a moment where there was $100,000 a year plus all the benefits of compensation in terms of commission and stuff, sitting on the other side, and the only thing blocking it was just this horrible human being, and all I had to do was get past this singular moment, and I'm serving this guy a cocktail, who's a great guy. He's still a buddy of mine, by the way, but serving him a cocktail, that was a tough moment in my life. 3 months in, I got a phone call from the lawyer of that firm, and he said, you know what, we're tired of this shit. We'll fight him for you, come on. And they let me start. I was so angry in that moment. So remember, I'm going in, I'm $45,000 into credit card debt.
Right.
And no money to my name. Kate's working for $15 an hour. I was so angry in that moment. I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do this. I flew to New York, which is where the firm was located. Kate gave me the last $300 that we had to our name. We had no more credit cards to max out. We were not going to make rent that month. We had $300. She gave me that $300 to go to New York, which is not a city you can survive on for $300.
Yeah.
I walked into a hotel, and I didn't have a credit card. I walked into a hotel in Manhattan, and I was like, I need you to take this cash and let me stay here. And the lady looked at me like I'd grown a unicorn horn out of my head. And I was like, listen, I have a job up here. I have to meet with them. I have to be presentable. I have to stay in a hotel. Like, I need you to take this money and let me stay here. And a sprinkle. She called the manager, and they let me do it. And I stayed there on cash in Manhattan, which is nuts. And went and, like, we were walking to lunch with my managing director. You know him. I'm not going to say his name, but, you know, talk about a guy also that played a huge role in my life. We were walking to lunch the second day, and I was like, dear God, I hope he pays for this. Like, because if he doesn't, I have nothing. Like, what am I going to tell him, you know? So I went into that job, $45,000 into credit card debt, angry as you could possibly be. I closed $60 million in the next, 75 days, and paid off all my credit card debt, paid for our wedding, and put a down payment on a house with, like, that first 6 months. That was 2019, and, we can get into it later, but 2020 from 2025, I have, I made it back.
And it was nice to know that I was the first.
By the way, you were the first one. That's right. That was so. I called you. Okay, so a cool story. I don't know if you know this, but when I started at that firm, we signed that deal up. My second day at the firm, that was the fastest a new originator had ever signed up a transaction at that firm. Most, like, when you're in originations, when you go to a new firm, most times it takes 60 to 90 days to get your first transaction. We did it in 48 hours. Yeah. And also part of the agreement was that I could not talk to any human I'd ever talked to, but I, like, slipped you in there because technically I'd spoken mostly with Jana. Right. So I was like, it's gonna work.
That's true.
Yeah.
It was. You had talked to Jana. It wasn't me.
Yeah. So that was part of it. And you paid off my credit card. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, that's great. That there's some details in there. Yeah, I knew of the situation going on there, but all those details I didn't know. So that's fascinating.
That's the first. Yeah, that's the first snippet of my true multifamily career.
And going to Manhattan and getting them to take
it's crazy.
$300 in cash at a hotel.
It's to think, like,
I mean, I traveled for 22 years, so I know going into a hotel that them taking cash is absolutely not going to happen.
Everybody riffs on me for this, but I'll only do Uber Blacks. I have a whole reason for this, but like I will only do like an Uber Black VIP, which is like the big cars. Mm-hmm. And I was like looking at it. This was last year. I can't tell you that the story was recent, but I looked at it. And it was like $332 to go from LaGuardia to where I stay at when I go to Manhattan. And I was like, I'm paying more for the ride into Manhattan than I used to, than I came up here with. So it's just crazy to think that that's the way the world works so quickly.
So then you were with that firm for how many years?
With the new firm, or with the firm that I was with? So I got.
Was it?
Yeah, I'll say Lumet. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was.
Didn't know if you wanted to say your name or not.
Yeah. I think I just don't want to say like people's.
Right.
It's just not fair.
So you were with Lumet for 2.5 years.
Yeah. So I was with Lumet for 2.5 years. So I went to Lumet to start their Nashville office. From scratch, and by the time I left, I had grown that office to be like the second largest production office for the entire firm. And Lumet was a massive firm. And I had a wonderful experience there. I tell people to this day, like I ran into the CEO last week in Vegas at NHC. I could not have a better appreciation and story with Lumet. The only reason I left was the former CEO of Freddie Mac, David Brickman, called me and he was like, I'm going to start, we're starting this new shop. We want you to be a huge part of it. And, you don't tell the former CEO of Freddie no. But yeah, I had a great great experience there. It was a good shop.
Yeah, they were.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
They were.
I live or die by my hair. So.
Luminant was great to work with. I mean,
Yeah, they're a great
when you
shop.
were there
Great
and
shop.
all that. So
Yeah.
good people.
Yeah, they are.
Real good people. But it also, moving over to NewPoint, also says a lot of good things about you. You know, because if David Brinkman came after you, that means they must have known what kind of volume you were doing
Yeah.
at Luminant.
Yeah, they did. Right. Yeah, I mean, so when the market like went from the 2022 to like the Fed started raising rates, it became in my industry it was like, all right, time to hop if you're hopping. I got like 18 phone calls, and some of them were like ridiculous, like major banks asking me to run their capital markets program. I was like, I'm like a 28-year-old kid, right? Like I'm not. I drink wine and eat food for a living. Like this is not. I'm not the guy. But David called, and he did a couple of minutes, and then was like, hey, I want to continue this conversation in person. I'll come to Nashville and have dinner with you. And we went to like my spot, Bourbon. Mm-hmm. We go to Bourbon and we sit down, and I had every intention to take his meeting and not join. I was not going to leave. But he talked to me for hours and hours about what he wanted to do with the firm and where he wanted to take it and what his vision was. And I was like, there's no way that I cannot be a part of this.
Yeah.
Like he was, talk about a legend in the industry. He ran the largest capital markets program in the world. So he's.
And I remember when you started Luminant. We'll back up just a second, but I remember because you had the kickoff meeting.
Yes.
For that.
Yes.
At Bourbon.
Yeah, at Bourbon.
Bourbon Steak. Yeah. So,
that's where it all got started, by the way. I don't think if I had eaten at Bourbon Steak before then, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. I think that's where it all started.
Yeah, when you invited some brokers up there for dinner. Yeah. So.
Actually, the guy that I served a cocktail to at the country club, I invited him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah.
I think he recently graduated from Auburn's real estate program. So now he's a Tiger.
Yeah, that's great. And now, how long have you been at NewPoint?
Since 2022. Since 2023. So I joined like December of 2022. Yeah. Luminant, in all their grace, right, did it the right way when I left. They garden leaved me, which is they took my non-compete and downsized it, which is how you should do it, by the way, in case he happens to be listening. but and that and many other things I would say. So I had like a 3-month little period where I just kind of camped out. So really like Q2 of 2023, and joined NewPoint and started its. And I was by myself at the time, and now there's 4 of us.
So now for NewPoint, what territory are you covering now?
Well, I've never been territorial driven.
Yeah.
Or territory driven. Yeah, not territorial. Territory driven.
Yeah.
I actually I'm working right now on a transaction in Southern California. So I don't do a whole lot past what I would say is past Mississippi. That's not like the usual suspects. Yeah. But I did a deal in Sandy Lake, Utah, this year, last year, 2024. Several Texas transactions, Phoenix. I think we're working on one in Seattle right now. I can't remember, but for the most part, most of my client base is in Manhattan and or in Tennessee proper. Yeah. So that's kind of my major footprint, if you will.
But when you first started with NewPoint, it seemed like they were going to have you, kind of start and take a lot of the southeast and a lot of that area.
Yeah, that was always
really kind of grow that part.
It was, and that was because I think in 2022, like when we were first talking, that was like the big buzzword in real estate was southeast, right? Yeah. Now it's like everyone's talking about the Midwest, so it shifts. But most of my physical deals take place in the southeast. But clients can come from anywhere. Yeah, you know that.
Yeah. And we just finished up at NMHC.
Yes.
which was a great experience.
4 grueling days in the desert.
Yeah. You come back from that exhausted
Yeah.
because it's just meetings after meetings after meetings for 4 days and dinners and all that. And by the way, NewPoint put on a great,
Oh, yeah.
you call that a cocktail
Spread?
hour? What,
I don't know.
spread?
Cocktail
I don't know
hour?
what that was. It was.
I've told our marketing team
incredible.
like four or
Great
5
job.
times I've gone back to them and been like, you threw the party of
Yeah.
the whole conference. Like,
Yeah.
it was great. I still have people telling me, like, that was awesome.
That was.
I intended to go work at that party. And then I got there and they were like, there's clase azul and crab legs. And I was like, well, that's literally my love language. So let's never mind working.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
So you have 4 people working with you.
Well,
You have
3.
A couple of analysts.
Yeah, 2 analysts. And then I have a partner that just recently joined me, Ellie Funk. And I'll say her name for her own publicity.
Yeah.
But,
And I know Ellie. So
yeah, she's
good person.
yeah. She's coming from Matthews, which was which is a real estate brokerage firm, and she's going to help me expand my clients' portfolios. So we're excited about that. She came out to Vegas with me and did all of our meetings and set everything up, which is good because I'm like the least organized human that's ever existed. So she's going to be great. They were saying this morning that I was going to do a phone call this morning, and she was like, "Do you want me on it?" And I was like, totally up to you, like if you want to be on it. And Rusty was like, Trey's a little too high energy this morning. You should go in and cause the peace. And I was like, all right. I'm getting tempered by my own team.
Yeah. That's funny. So,
But I've had multiple people come through on my team, a lot of young people whose careers I've been able to play a role in. And I think that when you are young, playing roles in younger people's careers, it's much more impactful than, like a mentor. I wouldn't say I've mentored anybody, but I would say I've played a role in young people's careers. And that's the position you get to do when you're kind of having as accelerating a career as I've had young. That's been one of the great joys of it, is to be able to play such a role in others.
So how much volume have you done the last couple of years compared to when you first started to now? So people can really understand the trajectory.
Yeah, well, notwithstanding the fact that last year was the toughest year in our industry.
It was tough.
I did $280 million last year. I've done something like almost $1.5 billion, almost $1.5 billion since I got into the business. But to do $280 million last year was a significant milestone.
Yeah.
And I financially had my best year. So 2024 was good. We'll see if 2025 happens, but we're off. We're like I think we're gonna do $100 million in the next 45 days. So we're setting a good base. My dream is to be a $1 billion originator, which literally means like you're doing $1 billion a year. But there's like, I don't know, 6 people in the industry doing that. I would be the first at my shop.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed.
Well, if there's anybody that can, it's you, Trey.
Thanks, Brian.
So,
That's what they keep telling me, but that's because they want me to do it.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, if there's anybody that can, I'm like, well,
but-
I don't know how much more wine I can drink.
But to have the energy and the personality and the drive, there's not many people that can match you,
Well.
Trey. I will. Trey is one of my favorite human beings. So
Thank you.
So even though we haven't known each other that many years, but
It's been half a decade, more than half a decade.
But
So
it has been
once you get into half decade,
yeah,
you
it's
could
been
say
a
you've known each other for a long time.
number of years. But
Yeah.
but honest, ethical, has higher integrity. It's just you don't find those people in this business that much,
Yeah.
and you have that. So and think the world of your wife.
Yes,
she is awesome.
me too. Yeah,
she is awesome.
She's at home right now. Both of ours woke up last night puking their brains out.
Oh no.
Yeah, so she's at home right now.
Yeah. And what are the
Taking
age
care
of
of
your
sick
kids
babies.
now?
So my daughter just turned 3. My son is 4.5, and we got a 10-month
The young
old.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, full house.
Yeah.
Full house. It's great. I keep saying like housing has been my life's calling. Right now we're building our house, And this is the first time that I'm not in love with housing. Building a house has got to be like one of the toughest things that you can possibly do. It is unbelievable. Like every turn is another thing, but we're trying to.
So how long have you had your home in Auburn? Because so as Trey mentioned, he graduated from Auburn. He's a huge Auburn fan.
Yes. Massive.
Goes to everything Auburn.
Yes.
So you bought yourself a house.
Yeah.
There so you can go back to.
Yeah. So housing is a love, right? Yeah. So Kate and I started flirting with this idea of sort of a love portfolio where we would buy real estate that was really important to us. We bought a house, our very first big sort of purchase that we could just do was we bought a house in Auburn that we call our game day house. This house is facilitated the college careers of something like 20 kids. People just come in and out of it. But we go back for game days. Yeah. It's been a good little shack. Yeah. It needs to get blown down by the big bad wolf, because it is literally a shack. But it's good. We bought that in 2021, I think. Yeah, something like that, or tail end of 2020.
All right, we're going to hold you to 2 minutes worth of tell us what 2025 is going to look like for the finance market.
Oh, all right.
No, take it more than 2 minutes. But
no, you're good.
We'll kind of end
you're good.
with that.
Yeah, are we coming up on the hour?
Well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Big takeaway. Lot of well-capitalized buyers. Lots of similar themes in the vintages that want to be purchased. Not as many sellers. I think we're going to have a good next 30 days because everybody's coming off the energy of NMHC. Let them get back from CREF, and which is the conference in San Diego. That'll be a good 30, 60 days, and then I think it's going to be a slow summer. I think it's going to pick up significantly in August. I don't think rates are going anywhere. I think we'll have a 4 handle on the Treasury for the rest of the year.
Yeah. You think there'll be a 25 basis point drop at all?
Maybe. I mean, high level, there's nothing really driving it. Yeah. It's tough. It's very tough to get a significant rate drop, especially in the short-term rates, without Fed policy. And in the long-term rates, you could get a flight out of the equities into bonds, or into Treasury bonds, but I don't know. I just don't see a big event happening in the equities market. If it's overpriced, I don't know. I'm not the expert on it, but I don't see why anybody would start pulling their money from it right now.
Right.
NVIDIA got its worst news that it could possibly get, and it's back up already. It's what, and they seem to be the driver of the market.
Right.
If NVIDIA fell out, then sure. But I don't know. I guess my core takeaway is I don't see a world in which rates have a reason to come in significantly. Yeah. I say that to the great detriment of myself, right? I want a 2 handle again, but I just don't see it. I think we are going to be defined as an industry by supply.
Yeah.
And that's, that's a whole other hour.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Trey. I really appreciate
you
coming on and sharing your story.
Sure.
Again, like I say, I think everybody has that origin story, how they got started. But I really wanted to kind of cover it because I knew a lot of your growing up years and a lot about that, which really adds to knowing who Trey is.
Yeah.
And that. So I appreciate you sharing all that. And that's kind of what I wanted to have on this podcast of, from foundation to fortune, because Trey does very well for himself nowadays. And so he's come a long ways.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
It's awesome. And appriciate having you as my kickoff
I was
guest
say,
for
good
this
luck
podcast.
with your podcast. I hope it goes well.
So,
get some real interesting people on. I'm you find me in a steakhouse with a bottle of wine, that's about as interesting as I get. But please.
Very, very good. But thanks a lot, Trey.
Yeah,
Appreciate
good luck,
it.
buddy.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is a wrap for our first podcast.